to the next episode of Anti-Liars. Today, we have with us Mr. Kenshu Aoki, who will help us try to unravel and understand how our movement could get to the point that it is at right now. Kenshu has done many different kinds of projects in our movement. He is actually the first second generation national CARP leader, has been, and he has accomplished one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen is his beautiful family of 7 children. So welcome, Kenshu.
Thank you, Howard.
Thank you for being here with us. Today, as already mentioned, all of us are saddened with the tragic developments that are taking place in our spiritual fatherland, Korea. The latest news says that Mrs. Hak Jahan is now facing indictment in just a few days on October the 10th for a number of charges. And if those charges are upheld, she will be facing years of imprisonment at the age of 83. So we are shocked. All of us are shocked at that development. How could we get to this point? And that's what we want to examine today. How could our movement go from the movement that I joined, that Kenshu grew up in and joined, to the kind of movement that we have today, which is in great confusion? A very important movement-changing event took place in 1994 when Reverend Moon announced the end of the church era. This led to actually great controversy and confusion in the movement, and primarily because some certain Unification Church leaders did not unite with Reverend Moon's direction to end the church. In effect, Unification Church should have ended in 1994 when he declared it. I just wanted to read one quote. We'll put it up on the screen. This is from Reverend Moon's Sermons, volume 266, page 256, which he spoke on January the 1st, 1995. Religion is no longer necessary. The era of the Holy Spirit Association for the unification of world Christianity is over. That's why I declared the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification. There, religion is no longer needed. It's the original family, uncorrupted as in Eden. So this, at the very beginning of 1995. So Reverend Moon made it very clear the church should end. He even implored many Christian pastors who were connected with the movement to even go in your church, take down the cross and bury it in your churchyard. Those kind of strong epithets and directions that he gave are stored in our memory. But he specifically said the Holy Spirit Association should end, but it didn't end. The resistance to the end of the church can be tracked back to certain church leaders who simply wanted to hold on to their positions. They gained their position, their power, their authority over the members through a structured church position. And now, Reverend Moon has announced to end that. And to complicate it for them, he also, as we know, in 1998, appointed Dr. Hyunjin Preston Moon to be his successor and to lead this, what we consider Reverend Moon's original mission. We know that he had to go 40-year wilderness course, and that was through HSA UWC. So when that 40-year wilderness course ended, that's the same time he announced the end of the church era. And we should go to Family Federation for World Peace, which involves everyone. So instead of being blocked into a small church structure, Reverend Moon was busting that open, coming out of that small circle to embrace the whole of mankind, which was his original mission, and which leads to God's kingdom on earth eventually. So the appointment of his son in 1998 was very important, and we want to show just a clip of that.
오늘 이와 같은 모임을 갖게 된 것은 통일교 역사에 있어서 혹은 선생님 일생에 있어서 처음 되는 기념의 날이라고 생각합니다. 뿐만 아니라 하나님의 소원이 있었다면 이런 날이 있기를 얼마나 고대했다는 걸 생각할 때 내 마음으로 깊은 감사를 하나님 앞에 드립니다. 아담 가정에서 하나님이 일대라면 아담은 이되고 아담 아들들은 3대인데 3대를 못 본 것이 타락이고 3대 역사를 다시 일으키기 위한 것이 구원 섭리와 복귀 섭리의 완성을 생각할 때에 이 3대를 중심 삼고 하나님의 공적인 책임을 임명한다는 것은 천주사적인 이변이다. 희망의 한날로서 이들을 현진 앞에 갖게 해준 것이다. 추가한다. 아멘. 얼마나 낫길 바라냐. 100배가 아니야. 1000배 만들을 바라. 낫길 바라냐.
So as you can see from the clip, Reverend Moon was so full of joy that day, and his pronouncements were so strong. This is a cosmic event, and it was very clear he was bestowing making his heir, Dr. Hyunjin Preston Moon, who then took that role very serious and to heart and followed his father's direction and began building the Family Federation and other aspects of our movement out, breaking out of the small boxes they had been in. And it was a very, very exciting time for that. And I know Ken Shu was very involved in CARP, which Dr. Moon had a lot of influence on. What was your personal experience during that time?
The STF program existed in the USA prior to Hyunjin's leadership, but under Hyunjin's leadership, STF grew to a global youth leadership training program. Mm-hmm. And the first year, you're raising funds for public purpose, mm-hmm. and you're cutting off from all the the fallen world. You go completely living for the sake of others. Nothing is about yourself. Mm-hmm. And it's really a special time where you're dressing humbly and your lifestyle is not connected to any of the superficial pretensions of the materialistic world.
Get to the
right?
bare basics.
Yeah. And so you get to the point where you hit this limitation, and the only way you can overcome it is through connecting to Heavenly Father. Mm-hmm. And connecting to who you are. And the more you discover who you are, the more you discover your relationship with Heavenly Father, right? And so there's that special aspect that all of the blessed children were experiencing and gaining that, quite frankly, is hard to replicate in any other setting. I mean, workshops are great, but they're a short period of time, just during the summer or something like that. It doesn't really push you enough to that limitation.
Put principle into practice.
Exactly, put principle into practice, and also to the point where you need to dig in deeper mm-hmm. to keep going. Mm-hmm. Right? It's this kind of natural, it's part of the principle of growth.
Spiritual growth.
Right, spiritual growth. So that first year was really about spiritual growth. Mm-hmm. You that's what you focus on. You don't need to even worry about, the food. That's the captain takes care of that. Yeah. You don't need to worry about, where you're going to be working. Exactly. Where you're going to go. Nothing. You don't have to worry about anything except the mission. Except the goal that you set and report to God, and your prayers and the amazing experiences that you have out on the front line, and then they're very moving experiences where there's no other way to explain it. You just break down in tears, mm-hmm. and these blessed children were having those types of experiences, unforgettable experiences where their hearts are moved and Heavenly Father speaks to them. And the second year is going on the campus, and you're training to share it with others, share this truth with others, help other people's lives, to have a sense of direction and purpose to, create beautiful families and to make a positive impact in society. And, to bring about one family under God. One family under God was really the clarion call on all of our youth activities at that time, because of all of the whether it was mega church tours or the GPS, everything was focused on this ultimate vision of one family under God, and we found tremendous power in aligning to that, because taking that vision onto the campus, it's like everybody was getting on board. I remember suddenly we were bringing in tremendous great outcomes on the campus, because the different student clubs were willing to get on board. It would be hard to just get on board if simply we're promoting a church, but since we're promoting one family under God, the different religious clubs, the different student clubs, not just religious clubs, but all sorts of social clubs and service clubs, etc. And as you would remember, also Service for Peace, right? So that focus on really contributing to society, bringing out a great vision, that's something everybody got excited about. And we were starting to really appeal to the general public. And that's exciting for Blessed Children, to see that we're going mainstream. What we're doing isn't like kind of small, weird, and insular, and isolated in a bubble, but it's something that society is impressed with and inspired by, and that we're recognized by in a very, very good light.
And how sad that came to an end, just as it was beginning to really grow.
No, I mean, it's depressing.
It's so
depressing
sad.
And just dark. So after STF, we went on to the college campuses, and we had so much confidence that we were going to change the world. But that confidence wasn't superficial, because it was rooted in the training that we had received. It wasn't just a lot of hype. It's challenging, but training by definition is something that's supposed to be challenging, so that it allows you to have that capacity to do so much more. Just to give you a small example, I mean, before the fundraising, I was scared to talk to strangers. So that of itself was a big, benefit for me. Of course, there's a lot of benefits, the spiritual experiences, the breaking of concepts that really equipped us, second generation, to have that confidence, as well as that spirit, and definitely faith. Really kind of, immersing into that area of faith and, purpose in life and meaning, and then you're really owning who you are and what you're trying to bring to this world, what you're trying to offer this world. And that's the type of spirit, that we had, that we're part of God's providence. And so that was exciting.
Yeah, it sounds like Dr. Moon really infused a new spirit,
definitely.
high spirit,
Yeah.
that caught the second gen imagination, not only here in America, but worldwide.
Oh, absolutely. It was definitely worldwide, and we would have these international assemblies once a year. And so you would see brothers and sisters from not only around the US, but Korea, Japan, South America, Europe, all over the place. And you had this common base of the training, right? And then there was this kind of common identity. So it was huge, because until then, what did you have? Like summer workshops. Workshops are great, but
It seems like Dr. Moon really brought the movement into the public much more than it was before. And that's a very important element when you're considering building a worldwide family federation for world peace. And he took that very seriously. And I remember these huge rallies that happened around the world. We'll show a few of those now. These rallies, literally tens of thousands of people, and Dr. Moon would speak to them and explain about one family under God. And usually at the end, there's thousands, tens of thousands of people shouting in unison, Aju, one family under God. It was so powerful. And this was a real movement taking place and growing in that time period, those 10 years from 1998 to 2008. But I can tell you, because I was working directly also with Dr. Moon from 2000 on, and there was resistance to this incredible work. And where did the resistance come from? It came from church leaders. The resistance to end the church started as soon as Reverend Moon announced it. Why do we have the church now? Because that resistance insisted upon keeping the structure of an institutionalized church. Reverend Moon never came to the earth to build a church or even one religion. He came as the third Adam for the entire world. And to go to the entire world, you have to have a movement out of the church that was a 40-year wilderness period and open to a federation of families worldwide. And that federation included people of all faiths. Anyone who agreed they would work together for peace, centered on a God-centered concept, could be a member or part of Family Federation for World Peace. So it broke us out from not only just recruiting and making church members, but involving people of all faiths and working in huge numbers of people, and all of that was taking place. But those who really wanted to cling to the Unification Church structure and keep that, they began the resistance. And that began quite early, but it continued to increase. Resistance to the end of the church eventually meant resistance to Dr. Hyunjin Moon himself. And after a while, his younger brother came into play. And this was important for those who wanted to keep the church structure because he was presented as a successful church leader and elevated that way. Now, the way that he got those accolades is very questionable because he started with a small church, and then reports came to True Parents, to Father, that, thousands have joined the church under his leadership. But when we investigated, we found out how he did that was close down all the churches in the area except for the one he was in charge of. So all the members had to come to his church. Now, this is a total fraud. But through that, he could be elevated to leader of Korea Church and then even leader of international church. And great confusion began to develop within the movement because directions were coming out of international headquarters that contradicted Reverend Moon's vision, which of course Dr. Moon was united with. But these directions would be coming from, quote, true parents, but they contradicted Reverend Moon. So in order to do that, those who wanted to resist had step-by-step elevated Mrs. Moon from the position that she was in of a wife under Reverend Moon, brought out of the fallen world and being trained and raised up as a true mother, to now being presented, and this was highly regimented, being presented as co-equal to Father, now equal to Reverend Moon. And that she and Reverend Moon were totally united and one. This is what UC leaders began to promote. So then they could send out directions from headquarters under the title of True Parents, but you didn't know if Reverend Moon knew about these or not, because they were, in many cases, contradicting his movement to build Family Federation and go to the world level, totally different effort. So how could this be happening, that contradictory directions are coming under the name of True Parents? And we found out, there's one example that I know about and many people know about, that show Reverend Moon, directions were going out that Reverend Moon had no idea went out. And this happened when a direction came from True Parents to take Reverend Huang in Korea out of a position that Reverend Moon had put him in. And that was being instituted in Korea. Reverend Kamiyama got the opportunity, and he was together with Father, just the two of them in the car. He brings out this declaration and shows it to Reverend Moon, and Reverend Moon says, I've never seen that. So Reverend Moon takes the document and in big letters, I disavow this direction, and signed it and dated it. And Reverend Kamiyama put that up on the internet to show this kind of intrigue was going on in the movement behind Reverend Moon's back. And without his knowledge, things began to happen. And of course, Reverend Kamiyama was soon dismissed from all roles that he had. So again and again, those who were really close to Reverend Moon, close to Dr. Moon, who wanted to keep that vision and build on that vision that Reverend Moon was giving and Dr. Moon was implementing worldwide, now this contradiction and conflict got bigger and bigger and stronger. And that eventually led to a showdown in 2009, early 2009, in the place called Sokcho. And there, these leaders in this we call cabal now, presented false spirit world messages to Reverend Moon, who was grieving for his son, Hyojin, who had passed away recently before that. And they told him these messages came from Hyojin. But they didn't. And they were lying directly to the aged Reverend Moon, who was grieving for his son, lying directly to his face. And the essence of these messages was all the leadership roles that Dr. Hyunjin Moon have should be taken from him and given to the younger son, Hyunjin Shan. And this is what was presented to Reverend Moon as coming directly from Spirit World, which is a total lie and a total fraud, and really tricked Reverend Moon. And in that meeting, Reverend Dr. Hyunjin Moon was taken out of those roles, and the younger brother was lifted up and became international leader of almost everything. But he did not have that same vision. So this meeting at Sokcho was a dividing line for our movement. It really completely divided and created the schism, actually, because these fake messages were totally fake, and they were lies, and they were effective. That when they were presented to Reverend Moon, they were presented as coming from Yonam Kim, better known as Daemonim, the spiritualist who was the leader at Cheongpyeong for a long time and well known by the movement all around the world. Reverend Moon was told these came through her. She was a well-known medium, so it was natural that such messages from Spirit World might come through her. But when he asked her to read these messages, she wouldn't do it. And later, when she was questioned, why didn't you go up and read? She said, I did not write those letters. I did not write those messages. Those were created by someone else. And then sometime later, Dr. Chang Shik Yang, who read them to Reverend Moon at this meeting, admitted that he and Mrs. Han together had written these messages. And these messages changed the leadership of the movement. Now, Shan Moon was being elevated to the highest level, and Dr. Hyunjin Moon was told by his father, come sit by my side for 1 year. And even now, he's accused about that. Why didn't you unite with Reverend Moon and just sit by his side? Everything would have been okay. But look what really happened after that, and what Dr. Moon knew. First of all, he knew that his father was being lied to, and his direction about sitting for 1 year came based on lies, which Reverend Moon did not know at that time. And he knew the consequences of these people who were taking over. They were not prepared at all for leadership of a worldwide movement. And sure enough, when Hyungjin Shan took over, he began to bring everything into the church structure, including the CARP movement, which I worked in CARP for over 14 years. And it was very important for CARP to be distinct from the church for its mission. But that changed very dramatically under Shan. And then other changes happened. Shan is the one who made Injin Moon the so-called leader, and she became like a 1984 Big Brother type leader in America. Every Sunday, instead of being able to hear the message from the local leader, everyone had to tune in and listen to her message coming out of New York. That's just one example. But it was very disastrous effects took place under her and Shan's leadership. And I know that these took a lot of impact, made a lot of impact on CARP in USA. Isn't that right, Kinshu?
Oh, certainly. Not just in the U.S., but all over the world, because I would say that was, and when we're talking about, 2008, 2009, around that time, it was a very confusing and I would say depressing time for many of us, because there was this excitement of even missionary work, right? There was this thing called Missionary Task Force, and that was our brothers and sisters, second generation around the world, and we would go out as couples, and it was really exciting, and to go out to a foreign country, and it was part of this 7 years course that we had, leadership training, and that was a lot of fun. I mean, that was a lot of fun, and just to even experience being part of God's providence, being, seeing the global foundation that we stand on and that we're going to, carry forth and expand on, that sort of providential identity, we were starting to own. We were starting to own. It wasn't just, we're just in the back seat, but we're training to lead this movement, to a higher level into the future. And we were on the front line of that.
Taking real ownership.
Yeah. Exactly, we're taking ownership. This is upon us. And then suddenly everything shuts down. No more missionary task force, no more CARP. Hyungjin Shamoon said CARP is no longer needed. And we're just kind of like, imagine being on the campuses, and we were having campus global peace festivals, and we were engaged, people were very receptive. We were engaging people of all faith backgrounds, all the student groups, working with us to do this, because who can deny one family under God? I mean, this was the new slogan that that Hyunjin kind of, it looked like, almost like a revelation in one of these mega church tours. He just stopped talking for like a couple minutes, and everybody was getting nervous. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. And suddenly, after a long silence, he says, "One family under God." And carries around the microphone and has these different faith leaders repeat it, and it was just kind of opened up a whole new I don't know, a whole new movement almost, right? Because now we had all this expand onto the campuses, and we had also the collegiate ambassadors for peace, or campus ambassadors, I forget which one it was, but student leaders who also believed in the same principles, of the ambassadors for peace. And so this was expanding on every level, and we were really pumped up. And suddenly it was completely shut down, no more support, no more resources there, and it was like not important anymore. Suddenly, just go and attend your local church. I mean, just become a church member, just tithe, and that's the best you can do.
Yeah, it was a shocking change for me to see that happen to CARP. And it also happened to other aspects of our movement, which were very important. The Ambassador for Peace program, when Sean met with them, he let them know that they had to become members of the UC. In effect, they had to recognize Reverend and Mrs. Moon as true parents. For example, this was breaking, in effect, Reverend Moon's word to them, because they became ambassadors for peace under the understanding that they were uniting and working together with other ambassadors for peace around the world, but they did not have to change their religion, their faith. They could remain a good Protestant minister, a good Catholic, a good Jew, a good Muslim, and still be an ambassador for peace. Now, suddenly, Sean, not really understanding the mission of the Ambassador for Peace program, or UPF in general, he completely blows out so many of the important ambassadors for peace who said, this is not what I signed on for. So that program also became ineffective and very discouraging to those who were working with it.
I remember that. He said something like, this was Hyungjin Sean Moon was saying something like, the ambassador of peace should just become Unification Church members, right? I mean, that's just, nothing's more bait and switch than that.
Yeah, he and Kukjin, who was his cohort and is still, they announced this incredible vision, which was completely unprincipled. And that vision was, when we make 51% of a given nation Unification Church members, that's how we will take over the country. 51% can dominate the others because they'll be in the majority. And that's how we do it. And this is completely against the tradition that Reverend Moon gave. Win them completely through heart, love, and vision. So a lot of these important people began to notice this change happening in our movement. And now looking back as we are today, how we got to the state where the financial center of Japan is facing dissolution officially. The spiritual center of Korea the population is convinced that Unification Church / Family Fed has now become a criminal movement, criminal organization. That's how we got there, but this is how we started with these kind of changes that were being noted along the way and being put upon the members of the movement, many times without them having a way to know about it. Just directions would come from international under true parents, changing everything, changing CART, changing the ambassadors for peace, changing everything. And this is where our movement was going. And then we came to Reverend Moon's passing. The division based on the attacks on Hyunjin just became so astoundingly from the dark side, I have to say. Can you imagine, this is father's son, never in our movement was a member of True Family brought to court or challenged in this way or character assassinated, much less the one who had been appointed and who took responsibility for the providence directly from Reverend Moon. 30 court cases were brought against Dr. Moon and his associates on 3 continents. It became obvious that they were trying to bring him to his knees financially through these outrageously expensive court cases. And hundreds of millions of dollars of donated money was wasted. And Dr. Moon, he persevered and won every one of those cases. Every one. So most of them were frivolous, cooked up cases. And when they played out in court, and sometimes on a lower level, the court judge is not so prepared to deal with a international, multi-business effort, would make a judgment against Dr. Moon. Every time those were overturned by higher courts who examined clearly and saw the real truth behind them. And the vilification reached the level where Injin Moon organized and sent out Joshua Cotter and the wife of Peter Kim on a lecture tour to cover all the country, showing the four-position foundation, using principal illustrations, showing that now Reverend Kwok had somehow become Lucifer, that they would have that four-position foundation, with Reverend Kwok as Lucifer controlling Dr. Hyunjin Moon, and that Dr. Hyunjin Moon was now fallen Adam. And this was presented to the members throughout the country. The members had no way to know the real truth at that time. This was presented as official information from headquarters under Injin Moon. Can you imagine that kind of vilification and character assassination taking place against anyone in our movement, but especially a member of True Family and the person who had been leading the movement, co-leading with Reverend Moon for 10 years? But this is what really took place. So since, when Reverend Moon died, passed away, we could see Mrs. Han very quickly got rid of Shan and Kukjin, basically kicked them out. And then they retaliated with calling her the whore of Babylon, et cetera, et cetera. And that kind of conflict happened. But through that conflict, we could see what was their real intention all along was to get rid of Dr. Moon. And they worked together on that. And then after successfully taking over the leadership roles of the movement, they began to fight among themselves because their position was never based on principle anyway and could not go anywhere except to division and fraction. And now the obvious results, we see the dissolution in Japan, we see the incredible public opinion turned against the movement that Reverend Moon and members shed so much blood, sweat, and tears to build, now is devolved to being this very selfish organization, even criminal organization now are the charges. And Mrs. Han herself is facing prison time, and those leaders who pushed her and helped make this happen, they are not taking any responsibility. They are throwing her under the bus. So the two closest to her, Yoon Young-ho, who was the international chairman, and directions from the international came through him for years. He immediately, when the fire hit him, the pressure from the interrogation, the prosecutors, he immediately said, yeah, I did this, this, and this. I did the bribery, but I did everything under the direction of Mrs. Moon, Mrs. Han. She doesn't even use Moon herself now. She wants to be called Mrs. Han, actually Holy Mother Han. But all of this is based on false establishment. Those closest to her, she depended upon. Mrs. McDivitt was raised and elevated by Mrs. Han to be the next one under her. She was her hairdresser for years. And from any objective viewpoint, totally unprepared to be a leader of an international organization. But she's been in that role. And is she there with her when we saw Mrs. Han go in for interrogation? Mrs. McDivitt was not by her side. And obviously she is not under fire now means she went along with throwing Mrs. Han under the bus. And the other leaders too, why are they not standing up and admitting some responsibility for this tragedy? They're not, they're escaping. And this is what many observers are saying, the end of the Unification Church is happening right in front of our eyes. It's because the baggage is becoming so much. The image is so negative. And unlike the case with Reverend Moon, when Reverend Moon went to prison here in America, the truth came out that he was being totally boondoggled by the prosecutors, totally false accusations, and even the IRS had to go against its own rules to put Reverend Moon in prison. So when the pastors and ministers and religious leaders in America found the truth, they rose up by the hundreds and thousands to defend Reverend Moon, to march on the streets. Even some of them went to jail in those out as a result. They stood up so strongly. So when Reverend Moon came out of prison, 1,500 religious leaders welcomed him in a banquet there in Washington, D.C. So maybe members are hoping this is a parallel, that Mrs. Han is in a parallel. Reverend Moon went to prison. Now she's gone to prison. It's all part of the providence, but it is not. This is not part of God's providence. And there will be no one rising up because the image is so negative and the proof is there. The evidence has come out. And you have testimonies by these leaders around her condemning her. And they've got all kinds of evidence from the raids they have done. So there's not going to be a swell of defenders rising up because the truth is exposed. Unfortunately, the judgment on Mrs. Han and the UC at this time is being done by the public, by the government, etc., because the truth comes out that it's being using unprincipled methods to get what they want. And that unprincipled stance began from the beginning with the attacks on Dr. Moon, and the takeover unrighteously and unethically. All of that is leading us and has led us to this point. You know, I know recently when Mrs. Han is being threatened with prison, that Hyunjin through as many emissaries as he could, sent the message, please contact me. I will try my best to help you, because it would break his heart for his mother to go to jail. And even though we know that she basically was a mastermind behind this whole thing against him and utilized different people to carry that out, he still has the heart of love for his mother. And unlike his brother, who condemned her, and even recently, after she was put in jail for this interrogation time, then Shan Moon exulted in that and condemned her again, etc., etc. Hyunjin Moon has the exact opposite viewpoint, wanting to help his mother in the crisis that she's in. Even if it was self-made, even if through that, she did many things to create an ideology that challenges principle. OBD ideology is not based on principle, has no real base, either theologically, historically, and so on. She introduced that. Many different things took place against Dr. Moon, but his heart is one of forgiveness. And he is open to all members to get back on track, to align with God's providence, as we've been talking about. And that goes for everyone. Even the biggest villains, the church leaders, who up till now, they have avoided any responsibility or consequences, but they may not escape. Some of them will probably be caught by the gambling problem that's coming out more and more. They cannot escape the truth of what they have done, one way or the other. And interestingly, it was Reverend Moon himself who came to recognize what had been done against his family, against Dr. Moon, against the providence, so that close before he passed away, there's this famous last, as far as we know, the last Hunduke that was videotaped, and we're going to show us a clip of that, where he labels these corrupt leaders as worse than Lucifer.
어머니 아버지도 하나 돼가지고 지금까지 어머니, 아버지, 아들, 딸이 지금까지 내버려서 사탄 속에 너희들 발 밑에 들어가가지고 자기 아들도 축복받았더니 축복이 천국 못 들어갈 그 아들, 딸 중 살고 선생님 아들, 딸을 밟아치웠더니 사슬을 했죠. 만국지정들이야. 응? 그걸 추려가지고 아벨 위원 중심사가 만들기 위해서는 선생의 아들도 선수의 가정이 완전히 짓밟히고 너희들은 무슨 굶어 죽기 전에 교회가 없어서는 안 된다고 해. 교회에서는 교회가 도둑질에다가 자기 아들 딸 먹이기에 수고했던 사람들이 천국 들어 하나도 없습니다. 선생님이 있으니 자기 아들 딸 희생시키면서 가인이 죄 가운데 축복받은 것이 이게 천국 들라도 못 가. 너희들한테 1000만 대의 빚을 산채로 모래 바다에 무보고 죽여도 자기 아들 딸에 부를 수 없는 비참한 그 아들 딸 중에서 모아지고 부모님도 봐서 부모님 아들 딸까지 묶어가지고 밟아 치우든 마음대로 세상에 너들 같은 데가 없었어. 루시엘보다 더 무서운.
Can you imagine worse than Lucifer? How can anybody be worse than Lucifer? Well, Lucifer disrupted God's providence and disrupted the family of Adam and Eve before they could actually become a true family. These leaders have attacked Reverend Moon's family according to his own words, as you see in that clip. And after true family was established, they have led the attack. So, interestingly, Injun, when her time in power that she took against principle as well, that time was disastrous for the movement and ended disastrously for her own image, as we know. And she had to leave or was forced out when she had illegitimate baby and so on. So when she was leaving, she told one of her associates, "It's okay. My main mission was to get my brother," meaning Dr. Moon, "and I did it." So she organized that lecture tour. She did everything she could to attack her her brother, Dr. Hyunjin Moon. And that's her status. Even her, Dr. Moon wants her to repent and come back and align with God's providence. So all of his family, he wants to reunite. And all of that family includes all blessed members, because in receiving the blessing, we become extended members of true family. So even he has offered redemption blessings so their families can realign and be straightened out. But this kind of dramatic change to go against this leadership and so on was actually seen first by Reverend Moon himself when he denounced them. And also when he publicly declared, "I have no wife," in front of 10,000 people in Korea.
어머님을 내가 길러왔어요. 어머니 없습니다. 문 총재 아내 자리도 없어요. 제멋대로야, 제멋대로.
The responsibility now is to all of us, to every member in the movement, to come to know the truth and then take action. Don't wait. Because in many ways, the UC/FFWPU ship is sinking quickly. And that is not because of God's providence. That is because of going against God's providence. We all realize that there were unscrupulous leaders who really caused the schism. And even Mrs. Han fell under their influence. And one of the first was Hyunam Kim, the so-called daimonim, who ran Cheongpyeong and who the movement knew that she channeled from spirit world, Mrs. Han's mother in spirit world, to her. So it was easy for her to whisper in Mrs. Han's ear, oh, the Han lineage is so much more important than the Moon lineage. You are actually the one. And that's what OBD theology teaches. But it's completely contradictory to principle and to God's providence. But Mrs. Han fell under that influence. And Hyunam Kim, so-called Daemonim, what happened with her? Many members don't know. She turned out to be a total crook, a thief, stole much money from the movement, and finally even Mrs. Han had to expel her. But she had tremendous influence in changing Mrs. Han's attitude and outlook. And this affected her relationship with her husband, because it was contradictory to God's providence and vision that he had. And sometimes in the meetings we would be with him, this would come out in the meetings. There would be conflict between the two. And sometimes Father would chastise her. Sometimes he would try to lift her up. He tried every way because he was responsible for elevating her up to the highest position. But prematurely, with things such as the ceremony for making her God's wife, which Shan Moon and Mrs. Han tried to pull off this ceremony. They had even a book prepared for that occasion, the day and the ceremony where Mrs. Han is made the wife of God. Reverend Moon was not even informed about it. Of course, he wasn't there. When he came back and found out about it, he totally dismissed it and threw it out. But this kind of effort, unprincipled effort, was part of that elevation of Mrs. Han, because these corrupt leaders were saying, Reverend Moon and Mrs. Moon, Mrs. Han are exactly the same, exactly equal, and totally united. From Reverend Moon's words to those 10,000 in Korea, where he says, I have no wife, mother's doing whatever she wants to do, we know from him that their unity was not there. There was a big failure in that way. And these corrupt leaders took advantage of that to the hilt and used it to attack Father's announced successor unscrupulously and incessantly for the last, since '08, 17 plus years. Most of the members have heard incessantly this propaganda against Dr. Hyunjin Moon, which in effect, when you know how the origin of this, you know this is against God's providence to go along with that. All these facts are coming out and are clear and are being made clear to everyone. And it's up to us to follow Reverend Moon's lead in denouncing or, cutting off from this false leadership, which he announced himself. But I just wanted to let Kenshu have a few words.
Many second gen, I know, struggle a lot with this, concept of this mystical, spiritual channeling type of things, and because you're just putting your trust completely in these spiritual mediums, and the Cheongpyeong, trend came really strong around the mid '90s into our movement. I would have to say that this perspective of this infallible human being, this infallible personality that you worship, started to really come strong around that time, because the Father was always seen as teacher and a model father, a true father that people could connect to, as literally a father figure that represented God's love, spoke the truth, gave guidance for my life. And suddenly, around the 90s, it's more about the crowned image of these infallible figures that, you kind of just put on a pedestal and admire, and they will follow, emphasis on just following and believing seemed to, more honestly similar to the Roman Catholic type of model of this, infallible aspects of the Pope type of thing, seemed to be coming, into our movement very strongly around that time. And today, what the Unification Church is known for today is these huge palaces. There's this major highway in Korea that runs right through the Cheongpyeong property today, and everybody sees this magnificent, now not just one palace, but two huge palaces, and the people of society is like, what's that about? And so there's this very kind of insular, cultish image that our church has, and I know many second generation struggled with this whole palace thing. What's that about, right? And I remember even with the first palace, why does God need a palace on earth? Like, what part of the divine principle, is that about? And I remember many second generation were questioning, and answers were like, well, it's actually a museum or this or that, and there wasn't any clear answer until I learned that it was not really Father's idea to begin with to start building palaces at Cheongpyeong. This really came from more of the Cheongpyeong leadership angle in terms of this idea itself, and that Father never really liked to spend time in those palaces anyways. He was spending time over in these little fishing villages and things like that where he would set Cheongsong. It wasn't, the palaces were not his cup of tea. So that was really comforting to know that those ideas didn't come from Father in the first place.
That's a very important point, because right now Cheongpyeong is like a monument to Mrs. Han. And here you can see some the statues there, where she is oversized in the center, Reverend Moon's over to one side, and the whole emphasis is on her as only begotten daughter.
Yeah.
So this huge palace was built on the blood, sweat, and tears of the members, so much in Japan that it caused the dissolution in Japan. We know it led to that problem. And how are those palaces, which very few people go, how is that part of God's providence to win the whole world?
No.
And draining all the resources into building those edifices, it's a very good point that you made.
Right.
And I'm not surprised second gen really see through that's kind of bogus when we're supposed to be helping all the people of the world,
right?
Not building palaces in the hills.
And Father would always would emphasize that we were his representatives, that the blessed families were the greatest testaments to what he was about, God-centered families. And so on one hand, there was supposed to be this movement of beautiful, great testaments to God's new truth that can be manifested through the blessed families, versus what you just said. Really, the legacy of the only begotten daughter is really demonstrated through the Cheongpyeong. Cheongpyeong is really, demonstrates the legacy, represents the Holy Mother Han. This, these palaces, and it is a monument to her, definitely. And it is about the only begotten daughter and worshiping her and praising her and putting her in a deity status. She is mother of, wife of God, or the feminine aspect of God, some sort of superhuman being.
Yes, it's very important for members to realize. And when you look back and you see her ascension was based on what happened at Sokcho, which were fake messages from mediums from spirit world, but these were fake and false totally. But the reputation of there's someone who can transfer from spirit world all this magic truth, and Father had dismissed that magical aspect, which the Christian creed is all you have to do is believe in Jesus. You can live a hellish life But if on your deathbed you proclaim, I believe in Jesus, then you're going to go to heaven. Just believe. And many times under Mrs. Hahn too, she's directing, if you just believe in the only begotten daughter, in the Holy Mother, then everything will work out fine. That kind of claim, is very, very suspicious, because it is just supporting this trend that led away from the providential mission that Reverend Moon brought, and we all joined a long time ago. This seems to be continuing that same trend.
Well, I think we're doomed if we're forever relying on spiritual mediums to tell us what to do. I think the greatest thing that Father taught was really about our human responsibility, that we are individual truth bodies and we are sons and daughters of God. And that is really a central, difference that I see in what the church has become, which is just follow. Just follow, believe, and obey whatever memo comes from the church leader, from the hierarchy. And that is the best way you can be a good church member, is to just believe and follow. And that is actually what I see here is, are we fundamentally church members, or are we fundamentally blessed central families?
That's right.
And the way that Father taught was fundamentally we are blessed central families. We are sons and daughters of
teaching exactly the same thing.
And so what Hyunjanim emphasizes is not blind obedience. He's always pushing. I mean, when I shared about the SDF training, it's because he wanted us to stand on our own, merit. And he emphasized merit, ownership, being true sons and daughters of God. And that takes a lot of effort to stand as leaders, spiritual leaders in our own right. He's always trying to empower us. That's why he's constantly pushing, right? It's like, when a coach really sees a potential in his players, he's going to push them because he wants them to be great. He's not going to just say, sit there, worship me, follow me. And so you see this huge contrast between the movement that Father was pushing for, and Father pushed us. Unite your mind and body. Unite your mind and body. Practice true love. Exactly. He didn't say, you know what, just worship me. Just look at me as the greatest. There will never be anybody. I'm the Alpha and Omega. I'm the embodiment of God, and there will never be another version of me. He never said anything like that. He always said, I want you to become amazing sons and daughters of God that can comfort God, bring him joy, so on and so forth.
It reminds me of Dr. Moon's appointment in 1998. Reverend Moon said, I want my son to be 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times better than me.
That's the heart of God.
That's the heart of a father.
Yeah.
And that's the heart our movement should be embracing and really living, so that our children, we look at our children the same way. I want my children to be 1,000 times better than me, because this is God's heart of restoration and of, literally building a worldwide family under God and God's love. And that's the true mission that has been just basically shunted aside, and we get into the Cheongpyeong palaces and just believe in OBD is completely off the mark from building that worldwide family under God, which the blessing allows us to do. And Hyunjanim, he often tells us, you are providential people. You have to know you are a providential person. And through the blessing, you became an extended member of true family. So God's expectation on each individual, each family, each tribe, etc., is still there to be lived out. Not we just obey and believe in a magical figure like the Christian creed taught.
Exactly.
What Reverend Moon and what Dr. Moon are teaching is very revolutionary compared to that. Each of us is a individual truth body, and we want our children to be that way, and we want many, many others to come to know that. And that's the real expansion. But now we see, by not having that basis in principle and in providential understanding, it leads now to the inevitable conclusions, disastrous results. Disastrous results in Japan, now in Korea, disastrous results for the leader of that aspect, which has gone from an unprincipled stand and continued in that way. So even, sadly, Mrs. Han, when she went in for the interrogation, she's keeping this image of herself as being the wife of God, the only begotten daughter, and that's the way she talked to the interrogators. And that's what came out in the media as well. So she announced there, sadly, that the next president of the nation should be one who is taught by me. And this is exactly what the Korean citizens were afraid of, that a religion wanted to come in and dominate the political aspect. And she just says it, publicly.
Which is very ironic.
It's very sad
it's very
because,
sad.
As they say, she bought into her own press. It seems she really believes that, and that's why she can dismiss her sons, dismiss the true heir, Dr. Moon, and take everything like that, because she has and is keeping that image that others planted in her mind that separated her from her husband and now has led to the consequences we see. The thing is, we members and blessed families can rise up and change this situation and help her by really creating and expanding the kind of movement that we joined, that Reverend Moon initiated, that Dr. Moon has tried to continue and has continued. We see dramatic results in his work in Korea. He won over the press. Nobody could do that before. Now, this last event he had on August 15th, over 300 positive media coverage was given. No one could dream of that happening, but he's made it happen. And through his book, The Korean Dream, the vision for establishing a unified Korea centered on godly principles is there encapsulated, and literally millions of Koreans now are involved in that grassroots coalition. So we can see, to cut it in short terms, God is truly blessing the work being done by Dr. Moon. What is happening is, to the Unification Church, Family Fed, we can see heaven's favor has been withdrawn and disastrous results are taking place. So Jesus said, "You will know me by my fruits," and we have to keep that in mind, and we should definitely search and make the effort to know the real truth of the situation now. And once we know it, stand up and do the right thing. Any closing words?
Well,
Sorry. Just go ahead.
Rewinding back to what you're saying about the, mother presenting herself publicly as this deity who should be even deciding who the next president should be and things like that, almost like a theocracy.
Yeah.
It's really ironic because it goes really directly against Father's teaching that Jesus was not God.
Right.
He's the one who taught us that Jesus was a true son, but there's no human being that can be God, right? We all are that the Messiah, even the Messiah, is an Adamic figure. He's human.
He has human limitations.
Yeah.
That's
So
right.
even if Mrs. Hak Jahan were to be, as she proclaims, to be a messianic figure, still, she would be human being, right? Not this, deity type of figure. So I find a great irony in her even presenting herself publicly like that. And I think the world, just from the responses on social media and things like that, are quite frankly, and this is painful because nobody wants to see Father's family and our movement be ridiculed and, be put in a position of being humiliated, quite frankly. But that really is honestly the situation. This is a very humiliating time right now, where Father Reverend Moon's wife is in jail, and the image of Father's family. I mean, don't want to go all into it, but I mean, bullet crowns, so on and so forth. And this is all open in the public. Is this how we want to be known for? Is this what Father would have wanted our movement to be known for? I would say definitely not. And most of the younger people will definitely agree with me and say that does not represent what our movement is truly about. I want to chime in. Mm-hmm. I want to go back and I want to chime in when you shared about how when 1998, when Father recognized Hyunjanim as his heir, that he said he wants Hyunjanim to be 10 times, what did you say, 100 times, 10,000 times better than him. Mm-hmm. And that makes so much sense to me, because then the future is bright. The future is going to be greater and have advancement. And that directly speaks to me even as a father of 7 children. I mean, how dark and depressing is it to say that none of my kids can become better than me?
Right.
I mean, the greatest hope and desire for parents is that their kids are smarter, more loving, more capable, better looking, so on and so forth. And just this sense of pride just wells up in you whenever your children perform greatly in school or sports or whatnot. So that is the parental heart, to want to see your children become greater than you. And that's what Father was saying in that very special event. And to say that your parents are the Alpha and Omega, and nobody will ever be as great as your parents.
Right.
Nobody can be better than your parents. To say that, which is what the church is saying, is the most depressing thing.
That would be.
And I think it goes directly against to the natural inclination as parents. And if God is our parent, then the heart of God is to see that his children can even become greater than him. And that is what it says in the peace messages, that the heart of God was to see and desire for his children to become even greater than him. It says that in the peace messages. And I truly can feel that as a father of 7, that is absolutely truth. And so it doesn't make sense to me to say that your parents are these supernatural beings and nobody can become as great as them. What kind of future is there? Does that mean that all the future generations should just become unimpressive? I mean, versus every generation
Heavenly
should be.
ceiling,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, thank you, Kenshu. That's very, very important. Coming from a father of 7 too. Yeah. All of this is being played out in the public. The image, what is the image that we want our movement to be like? So there is the bullet head crown, guy with the guns, at the blessing, you have to carry an AR-15. That's the rod of iron. We know the rod of iron from principle was the truth that the Messiah brings, not some physical weapon, but that image. And then we have the image in the Unification Church side. The leader is guilty, is charged, and most likely will be found guilty of bribery of political officials and misuse of public funds and excessive gambling, all those kinds of images, and is now in jail, and the top leader under her is in jail. That image. And then we have Dr. Preston Hyunjin Moon, who is seen in Korea as a great visionary already, and millions of people following that Korean dream, that they want to unify Korea in a God-centered nation, North and South. So it's not to be done by the government of one or the other taking dominion, is to be done by the people. And this grassroots movement is rising up like that. That's the kind of image that Dr. Moon has in the nation, in the same nation where his mother, who had him kicked out, is now in jail and facing prison sentences. That's the reality. And his heart is to help her. He shed tears over her. And that reality will never change. He's told us many times, these are my brothers and sisters, my own mother. They're attacking me, but they are my brothers and sisters. They are my family. And I will make the way for them to come back into alignment with God's providence. That is his heart. And that's the image that we have working with him. As we were talking about the movement we joined so long ago, I joined 50 years ago, and that movement we joined was an exciting movement. We have found the messianic mission, and it's on me. So what am I going to do? Do I go as a missionary to some part of the world? What am I going to do? We didn't know. But that was the excitement, the feeling, and the promise that the movement held for us. That's why we could join, regardless of what our worldly situation was. We could join this movement full-heartedly and just go into it. And God would give us missions in it, and that's what happened. And that's the kind of movement I'm experiencing under Dr. Hyunjin Moon. The same kind of excitement, the same kind of vision, because he's totally in unity with God and with his Father and with that mission, and determined to fulfill it. And we know he was a visionary behind building one of Father's great dreams on Yoido, this Park One project, the visionary behind that. And he's accomplishing the things that Father wanted to have happen, like having positive media coverage of the works that he's doing, and a giant grassroots coalition to bring the nation together. And not only that, but expanding that to other nations, that movement to unite and support Korea's development like that. It's so exciting and so full of promise. That's the image that he's projecting, and it's up to members to look at it themselves objectively. We know you've been inundated with propaganda against Dr. Moon for 17 years. We know that, but you have to look at the facts now. There's historical record, historical tracks made that don't change, and the image that you can see with your own eyes in all three camps, and come to the right decision and align with God's promise again. And I want to close out with just telling everyone viewing, God bless you, God bless your family, and may you find the truth of God for your family at this special time in history. God bless you, and goodbye.